Welcome to us all on this Friday morning in Toronto. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was launched on the 15th of June in 2006 by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health Organization at the United Nations. And yet 14 years now, and we are still talking about elder abuse. And we're not only talking about elder abuse, we're seeing it in different contexts all over the world. Over 15% of people over the age of 60 in the WHO European region, approximately 30 million people, were estimated to be affected by some form of abuse last year. While it is too early to have robust update data for 2020, it is believed that abuse towards older people has risen significantly during the COVID-19 pandemic. At this point, I just want to acknowledge that there are thousands of people working on this portfolio in every single country and community all around the world. And there is nothing more unacceptable in my world, and probably in yours, around the issue of elder abuse. You know, we have leaders such as Susan Summers, Gloria Gutman in Canada, Sylvia Beales, Cynthia Stuen, hundreds, if not thousands of people that have been working. And yet it doesn't seem to move in terms of solutions and prevention. Elder abuse can be very insidious, slippery, and sometimes almost invisible. And, we only have to look in our own backyards, to see the nature and the insidiousness of elder abuse. But it can be very loud, it can be very noisy, and always it attracts painful headlines that create deep wounds in our society. And that's where we sit today in our conversation with Kimberly Whaley. Kim is smart, accomplished, and a dedicated person who fights every single day for the rights of older people. She is the founding partner of the Whaley Estate Litigation Partners, repeatedly ranked one of Canada's top firms in some of the toughest areas associated with growing older, such as estate, trust, fiduciary litigation, including power of attorney disputes, accounting applications, guardianship applications for dependent support, and elder law. I'm not sure whether Kim goes happily to her office every day, because it seems that she's one of these people that are really at the front lines every single day fighting for the rights of older people. She's formally recognised as a leading practitioner, has held executive board positions with the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners worldwide, past chair of the Ontario Bar Association Estates and Trust section, and it goes on. She has a formidable CV. But Kim, I have the great pleasure, and so does Greg Shaw, of knowing Kim the person. And Kim the person and Kim the professional are basically one and the same person. Some of the fun facts, and one that really caught my eye, and you're a better person than me, Kim, driving along most of the California coast with your daughter, listening to every Taylor Swift song that was ever made. I think that that's a burden that you'll have to carry for the rest of your life. We are very fortunate to be in conversation with Kim, so I welcome the toughest and the hardest questions for her, because she's quite some lady when it comes to this field. So welcome, Kim, and thank you.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Barratt. It's my absolute pleasure to join you and the IFA today for the town hall discussion, and importantly, to participate interactively with such an esteemed group of passionate advocates. It really is a sad commentary on society that elder abuse is something that I see every single day in my practice in one form or another. I try my best through experience, because there isn't always a legal answer, strategies to assist families, concerned citizens, to help and support their friends and neighbors and loved ones And sometimes these strategies work and sometimes, unfortunately, they do not work. Older adult abuse never has a clear path to resolution. The remedies often involve the combined efforts of different stakeholders, whether those be friends, family, the police, healthcare professionals, financial institutions, lawyers, courts, tribunals, the government, boards, agencies, or other. The one message I would like to communicate is that it really does take a community to prevent, to detect, and to resolve. This week, as Jane mentioned, was marked by the United Nations as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, acknowledging the significance of elder abuse as a public health and human rights issue. Many organizations followed suit, recognizing through their own means of dissemination of knowledge, teaching, and social media the important social and demographic issues that we're experiencing with our international aging population. I commend all of these local, global, and international efforts, since together we really will make a difference. As part of my contribution recently to address issues of elder abuse, my law firm wrote and published a book on elder law, which contains legal information and resources, tools, and checklists to help raise awareness and to consider the consequences of abuse and to hopefully teach communities and providers to be aware. That is available to you on my website. And a week ago, I did a YouTube video as an overview of some of the matters raised in the book, and that is also available to you through my website. Elder abuse is a serious international problem. It's expected to increase as the population continues to age, and when we have a significant transmission of wealth expected from this generation. Advocates for the rights of older adults play an extremely important role in the protection and furtherance of rights. Elder abuse, whether it be financial, physical, sexual, psychological, through neglect, has gained traction and continues to attract the attention of our lawmakers, our regulators, and professionals working in interrelated fields. As an example, because of COVID-19, at least in Canada, the atrocities occurring in our long-term care and retirement settings has gained national attention. The neglect and outright abuse did not just arise as a result of COVID, however. Not at all. Many of us know and knew of the existence, as did our governments, but it has now been uncovered in large volume. And perhaps as a result, we will see much needed reform and laws developed with checks and balances to prevent future atrocities. Today, this morning, I want to talk a bit about financial abuse and ethical issues, as well as adapting to the new professional challenges. Generally though, to be proactive members of a civil society, each of us needs to raise awareness of elder abuse, to improve the knowledge transfer and information dissemination amongst the public at large, and amongst multidisciplinary fields, so as to continue to improve upon best practices, to educate and train professionals, to assist everyone in the ability to detect abuse and to report it, to implement action plans based on needs and what is revealed through research, to increase access to resources, the supply of resources, to develop ongoing resources for the community and for the community responses, and to constantly work on developing new laws and guidelines. COVID undeniably has caused an increase in reports of elder financial abuse. One of the three areas I want to talk about today includes the distressing challenges that the pandemic has inflicted, including the increased susceptibility to abuse and financial exploitation. And this financial abuse can take many forms. For example, it could be through the misuse or abuse of a power of attorney document, a power of attorney for property, where there's self-dealing or appropriation or theft or fraud, or stealing of an adult's money, pension checks or possessions, impermissible use through an ATM machine or online banking access, or transferring money outright or into joint accounts, committing fraud, forgery, extortion, sharing a home, living with an older adult without paying a fair share of the rent or expenses, unduly influencing an older adult to sell or transfer real property, to make large gifts, to change beneficiary designations on banking instruments or insurance plans, or to make or change a will. With COVID-19, there has been increased pressure put upon families in their homes. Many have lost their jobs and have turned to their elderly parents for support, which has manifested a situation of further susceptibility to abuse. Despite the growing problem, our Department of Justice, so many of our abuses are underreported, and that would be criminally, and that there are reasons for that. What are the reasons? Feeling of shame or embarrassment as a result of being victimized, or being fearful of the perpetrator or authorities, or being dependent on the perpetrator for their own physical well-being, or feeling a need to protect the abuser, especially if the abuser is a family member, and perhaps the only family member, feeling that an unhealthy relationship is better than no relationship at all, simply not recognizing the abuse as an abuse, fear of loss of independence, or loss of a longtime family home, or fear of being placed in a care facility, the inability to report or extricate oneself from a bad situation. The most frequent perpetrators of financial abuse on older adults are adult children. That's terribly sad. Service providers also come into that group, and strangers or even spouses. And in the predatory marriage context, and this is where you have unscrupulous individuals who prey upon an older adult with diminished reasoning ability purely for financial gain, has increased. And within the last few years, we worked on a pro bono case where the court set aside a marriage and the gains that a predatory spouse benefited from on the grounds of the lack of capacity to marry. And in that case, the judge saw Legal Aid Ontario paying for the predatory spouse's legal costs. And this is a case where there was clear medical evidence of incapacity, where there had been a lien put on the incapable person's property to protect the person, and that was by the public guardian and trustee, where the predator moved from Ontario to British Columbia, yet the certificate wasn't revoked. And the judge, in ordering Legal Aid to pay the costs, I think was trying to ascertain some sort of accountability for the use of public funds. Legal Aid Ontario appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the cost order was reversed. And the litigation guardian for the incapable person appealed for leave to the Supreme Court of Canada and lost. And unfortunately, this is especially upsetting where there's a vulnerable and capable victim who had no choice but to use the court system to get justice, and notably the proceedings were commenced by the predator. Detecting and preventing abuse is even more complicated currently. It's almost impossible to know who the persons are that may be doing the influencing, and that's because of increased isolation. Not only are older adults at higher risk for suffering death as a result of COVID, they're also the most targeted group amongst fraudsters and scammers looking to take advantage of fear and anxiety associated with this pandemic. So seniors at home alone in COVID isolation may look to the internet to get information, or answer calls and engage in conversations they might otherwise not engage in. And there's no one to share the COVID-19 journey with them. They may be at increased susceptibility to scams due to lack of experience with technology, or issues of diminished capacity, or simply just vulnerability. The pandemic has become the perfect storm for targeting our vulnerable adult population. So what are some of the examples of these scams? There are phishing scams, which probably makes the top of the list, where mass emails or text messages are sent out asking people to click on links offering COVID-19 test kits or free masks, hand sanitizers, or even miracle cures. These emails and links may have malware or attempt to extort victims who are told that their computer has been hacked. There are merchandise scams, where persons are manipulated into placing an order they think for free masks but then are being told to pay shipping fees, and they provide credit card information. And unauthorized charges may appear on the credit card. No masks are ever shipped. There's community helping scams. I've even had 2 calls like this. Callers say that they're trying to connect with a socially isolated individual during the pandemic, but in some instances, these callers are predators who are actually trying to identify vulnerable persons so they can get into their house, sell them things, or steal personal information. What these scams have in common is that they use high-pressure sales techniques to force individuals to do something and to do it quickly. When individuals fall victims to such scams, the unfortunate reality is that even though there are criminal remedies, the fraudsters live in foreign jurisdictions and are untraceable. As soon as the money is transferred, it's gone. It's never recovered. The circumstances are different when the perpetrator is known to the victim. For example, when an adult child misuses the power of attorney, either legally granted or fraudulently procured. In such instances, there are remedies available, both civil and criminal. Our firm put together a checklist of these various remedies, and I recommend it to you. It can also be found on our website. The second issue I want to mention are ethical concerns and legal challenges facing older adults and their families. Ageism encompasses many concepts and issues and includes stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination against people by reason of age. Ageism is widespread and is insidious, and it has harmful effects on the health of older adults, including psychologically. There are several laws in Canada aimed at protecting adults, preventing elder abuse, and in most jurisdictions across Canada, there is mandatory reporting for abuse. At the same time, ageism means there is often a marked lack of interest in advancing or protecting the rights of the elderly and achieving just and equitable results. This alongside difficulties in reporting and prosecuting. Even though Ontario's Long-Term Care Homes Act and Retirement Homes Act and regulations impose clear standards for long-term care homes and rigorous inspection regimes to enforce these standards, they're not being enforced. Regulations are not good enough. Statutory accountability needs to be enacted and enforcement steps mandated and actively taken in ensuring compliance. On the website for the Ontario Ministry of Health, Ministry of Long-Term Care, it states that long-term care home quality inspection program safeguards residents' well-being by continuously inspecting complaints and critical incidents by ensuring that all homes are inspected at least once per year. Recently, CBC News investigation reviewed inspection reports from the last 5 years for all long-term care homes in the province and found that while most received a comprehensive resident quality inspection in 2015, in 2016, and 2017, the number dropped to just over half in 2018 and just 9 last year in 2019. Although there is this annual inspection, on investigation, only 9 out of 626 homes in 2019 in Ontario received the so-called resident quality inspection. And many abuses go undetected in these settings and unreported altogether. One of the more topical elder abuse cases is a case of Elizabeth Wetlaufer, a registered nurse who was convicted of 8 counts of first-degree murder, of 4 counts of attempted murder, of 2 counts of aggravated assault. In every case, the victims were intentionally injected with an overdose of insulin. The murder spree would have gone undetected altogether had she not confessed. And as a result of this incident, the Long-Term Care Homes Public Inquiry was established in 2017 to look at the safety and well-being of residents and those receiving publicly funded healthcare services in their homes. This inquiry released the final report. It can be found online. We provided the link for you today. It included 91 recommendations to be implemented to improve the care system in our country. The recommendations are based on 4 systemic responses, namely prevention, awareness, deterrence, and detection. The report highlighted systemic vulnerabilities. In Australia, recently, there was a Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, which was established similarly to investigate how older people are cared for and to report on what needs to change to make aged care services better. It was established in October 2018 after a mother and son had lifted the lid on a system in crisis, which resulted in the closure of the nursing homes where her husband had been placed and received abuses. The commission held hearings throughout the country, listening to the evidence of family members, medical experts, and bodies and unions. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 situation in such facilities has gotten worse. 82% of Canada's COVID-19 deaths have been in long-term care facilities. The Canadian military was even called upon to help out as a backstop to the provincial system, which had been overwhelmed by COVID-19 cases. And they drew the curtain back on horrific allegations of elder abuse in 5 Ontario long-term care homes. The current crisis is revealing the weaknesses of a senior care system that has suffered decades of neglect. Sadly, it has taken this global pandemic to uncover these problems. Thirdly, and lastly, I want to discuss some of the challenges of professionals. As lawyers, we owe a strict obligation to a duty of care to our clients, and we're bound by provincial law society rules of professional conduct, provincial and federal statutes, and jurisprudence that all help provide guidance in navigating these issues and issues of capacity and undue influence and issues of vulnerability. Pre-pandemic, lawyers working with their adult clients tried to develop best standards to meet with their clients face-to-face, often alone without the presence of others, to ensure and ascertain capable instructions free of undue influence, to ensure that our clients were able to instruct counsel. And that's notwithstanding the presumption at law of capacity. If the client had barriers or issues or disability, it was more easy to discover them and to make appropriate accommodations. However, in the current climate, and even with social distancing, lawyers are not easily able to do their jobs and not easily able to discharge their duty of care, and must now rely on audiovisual technology to consult with their elderly clients, who even with social distancing are at an increased risk and not ideal candidates for in-person meetings of any kind. This is challenging for many reasons, including, for example, in a virtual meeting, there might be other individuals in the room, or the client may have language barriers, or be isolated, or not familiar with the use of technology, or doesn't have access to a device, or a device that provides audio and visual technology, for example, Zoom or FaceTime or a similar platform. Or such tools and resources may have been deliberately taken from the individual so as to prevent obtaining legal advice freely. I've found myself in a number of these situations recently. One notable one, I was contacted by an adult child requesting assistance for an elderly parent. And though I've had several discussions with this person, I'm uncertain as to cognitive impairment, if any. There are definitely language barriers. They can be potentially navigated, but there's no access to audiovisual technology to permit me to properly evaluate the situation, to see if I can get instructions, to see if ethically I can take a retainer or payment from the would-be client, to get a written signed contract, a retainer. All of these are obstacles that are heightened now, obvious barriers that take time to address and organize and make it ultimately difficult for lawyers, and especially the older adult community. Adding to the mix the opportunity it provides would-be predators seeking to control and manipulate, restrict, or limit the actions of such individuals makes this situation even more ripe for abuse. Isolation is a huge, almost impenetrable issue right now and for the foreseeable future. And older adults will suffer disproportionately because of the isolation associated with this pandemic. Despite these challenges, lawyers still have to meet their ethical and professional obligations and must continue to be vigilant and assess whether potential clients possess requisite decisional capacity. Undue influence is difficult to detect. Usually face-to-face client meetings pose a difficulty in detecting undue influence. It's even more so where you're doing virtual meetings. Professionals need to be hyper-vigilant during these pandemic times because unscrupulous individuals may see this as an opportunity. And so to assist lawyers in carrying out their professional and ethical obligations when conducting virtual meetings, we also developed a checklist. It's also available on our website. And just to mention a few of these before I close, some of the things one would want to look out for would be to take stock. Is there an individual with the client in the same room during the video conference? Try to interview the client alone. Ask if the client can give you a 360-degree view of the room. Request that the client not mute the sound through the entirety of the meeting. Request that if there are doors, they be closed. Observe closely the body language. Listen for rustling papers and distractions. And if you hear that, ask, make inquiries. If someone insists on being present in the room, establish who that person is and why that person is there. And what is the relationship between the individual and the client? Who is your client living with during the pandemic? How is the client dressed? Does the client's appearance or surroundings show or raise any red flags about personal care? Is your client looking at the camera or looking off camera for answers? Is someone writing down and holding up written answers for the client to read? I've also had this situation recently. They're very tough situations to navigate. Some changes have happened in the estate and trust and elder law field during COVID. The Government of Ontario issued an emergency order in council permitting the virtual witnessing of wills and powers of attorney for property and personal care. This emergency order requires that wills and powers of attorney signed in the presence of two witnesses, which may be satisfied now by means of audiovisual technology. This is defined as any electronic method of communication in which participants are able to see, hear, and communicate with each other in real time. The person signing the document and the two witnesses must be able to see, hear each other at all times when the documents are signed in order to ensure that virtually witnessed documents are signed correctly and to safeguard against abuses. The emergency order requires that at least one of the witnesses to the virtual signing is a licensed lawyer or paralegal. And thank you for the opportunity to have made these comments today.
Look, thanks very much, Kim. And we've got a flurry of questions from all over the world. So I'm going to go straight to asking three people to have their questions ready. Bridget Penhale, who is an extraordinary academic and has done a lot of work in this field in the United Kingdom. Edna McKim, and also Christine O'Kelly. If we can keep the questions tight, then we'll get through a lot of questions. So Bridget, would you like to kick off the question session?
Thank you, Jane. I guess my question is whether you could say a bit more about the tensions that we see in elder abuse between safety and protection versus autonomy for older people, especially for those living at home. It seems to me that this is really a very key issue that we have to try and get right. So I'm wondering if you could just say a bit about the ethical basis in relation to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. We'll go to Edna. Edna, would you like to come forward with your question? All right, so on your behalf, Edna, Kim, are there specific laws around financial abuses against people? Edna's been advised cases of financial abuse can only be prosecuted when the financial loss is significant. What would be the role responsibility of the Law Commission of Ontario in this case? And then we move on to Christine O'Kelly from Ireland.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you could say something about adult children that decamped to their parents' homes during COVID I've had a lot of first-hand accounts from participants in our programme who are adult children moved home and they've taken over the parents' house. They're not contributing to the bills. They don't see this as being a form of elder abuse. And older people are effectively prisoners in their own homes. And I'm wondering, is there any advice you can give to older people to counteract that?
Okay, I hand the floor to you, Kim.
Wow, okay. So to start with, there is an extreme tension in some cases as between balancing the rights and autonomy of the person against the protections that persons want to either afford them or force upon them. And so our substitute decision-making regime in Ontario, at least, tries to balance the autonomy and the protections in a way so it has to empower the person, the subject matter of any proceeding. Is it a perfect scenario? No, not always. Substitute decision makers are charged with a responsibility under the legislation to always consult with the person for whom they are making substitute decisions and involve them in the process and seek wishes where capable wishes, I suppose, where there's no capable instructions. As a lawyer, the natural inclination is to want to protect, but you always have to look at, you have a client, the client is retaining you to assist with a particular issue, and you're going to treat that client as you do any other client, whether or not they are compromised or not. It's just that the duty and obligations that the Law Society and the various, I suppose, ethical considerations that come into play will mean, especially if you're an officer of the court, that you do have to ensure that you are able to take capable instructions and that you are not taking advantage. So with that, I think I'll move to the next question, which was, are there remedies for financial abuse and the role that the Law Commission for Ontario has to play? The Law Commission of Ontario has more recently done some studies. You can find the reports from these studies that on their website. They did one more recently on the laws affecting older adults, on the substitute decision-making and guardianship regime, and they're currently working on the laws for later, for well, I forget the name of the I think it's care in later life. They're working on that one currently. But the Law Commission reports have suggested many changes, and I haven't seen one of them implemented. So the Law Commission for Ontario consulted many stakeholders in coming up with the recommendations that they have, but they are slow to be taken into consideration, I think. The remedies are both civil and criminal. So our criminal code, our federal criminal code, does provide for theft under powers of attorney, does provide for theft over $5,000, does provide for fraud, and so there are many criminal remedies that are available. The difficulty is the reporting regime and the ability of the subject matter to report, and the fear associated with that reporting, in that an older adult may not want to report a family member who may be criminally prosecuted. And sometimes there is just not the wherewithal to do that reporting. So we also have the difficulty of the standard of evidence required to criminally prosecute, in that the standard is beyond reasonable doubt. So often people look to the civil remedies that are available. And the civil remedies are fiduciary accountings, bringing applications or statements of claim to try to provide restitution for the person for the financial loss and the damages and costs associated with trying to get the money back. We bring applications to remove attorneys from being able to access funds where they're in breach, and similarly with court-appointed guardians. So I hope that gives you a flavor of some of the criminal and civil abilities to remedy abuse situations. With predatory marriages, as I mentioned, similarly, applications can be brought to set aside marriages. Applications can be brought to set aside large gifts where there wasn't capacity or where undue influence was present in the procuring of the gifts. And I think the last question raised was about older adult children moving in with their parents and them not paying a fair share of the expenses or rent, etc. And that's a problem which exists all the time. It for sure has been heightened during COVID-19. And you're right, there is increased isolation, and people are prisoners in their own homes right now, and more so the elderly. And I don't know what the right answer is to this, especially with that group of persons being particularly vulnerable, even in a social distancing situation. They are at increased risk with respect to the consequences of contracting this disease. And all I can say is all of us have to be vigilant and to try to assist where we can, and to report where we can. And who can we report to? We can report to the police. We can report to the public guardian and trustee, but I'm going to say that everybody is marred by the same restrictions right now. And so I feel the frustration in my practice every day when I try to help clients and discharge my professional obligations and my ethical obligations, and I feel constrained because of the situation. I feel that I'm not able to do my job as freely, and I know that seniors are suffering as a result of it.
Okay, we've got lots more questions, so we'll hurry on. Could I ask MK Rayner, Hava, Lorraine Leclerc, and Sylvia Beales? So try and keep them tight. So MK Rayner, are you on the line? Okay, we'll move to Hava.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
You hear me? My question is, a nursing person in an aged home, what restrictions to put on her are legitimate in order to protect the elder people in the home? What can we demand? What is she supposed to do? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you're from Austria, so thank you.
I'm from Austria. May I say one more word, another question? May I?
Yeah, you've got the floor, Hava. Go.
Well, this is a special case that we had. I'm an NGO and we are working in Israel. And we had an aged woman who she was nursing her spouse, and he was violent. And she couldn't leave him during COVID-19. She couldn't, we had shelters, we had emergency shelters, but she said she cannot leave him alone. What were we supposed to do in this case?
Okay, thank you very much. We call on Lorraine Leclerc.
Good morning, everybody. My question, because there are many ways that we can support our aging population, and for me, it's really been staying with me over the last while about the lack of auditing. just for clarification, I was in police work. I was a police officer, so I look at things a little bit differently than some. And I feel that the laissez-faire attitude that I got with regards to how the audit is processed and how things are happening, I'd like to know what we can do, what I should be doing, and if there's any actual proactive support group out there that can make things a little bit more elevated with regards to auditing private and public facilities and residences. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. And Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Greetings from London, everyone. And thank you, Jane. My question is about visibility and its connection with abuse. At least in the UK, it might be the same everywhere. The instructions to self-isolate when you're 60 plus or have multiple health conditions and so on means the visibility of older people is near zero. When you walk around, you see younger people running, jogging, picnicking, etc. But older people are not there. What, in your view, is the effect of this on abusive behavior? And how, you talked earlier very interestingly about all the combinations of people, the stakeholders that should work together to, to stop this, or at least be alert to it. What's your view about going forward? Because people are still, at least in the UK, very afraid when they're older about going out. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Over to you, Kim.
Okay, I wish I had all the answers to these very good questions and comments. First of all, Hava mentioned nursing restrictions and legitimacy. I don't know a lot about this. I know that in Ontario, nurses have their own governing and regulatory board. I don't really know a lot about the disciplinary process. So I'm going to stick to what I know and what I don't know, and apologize for not being able to shed more light on that. Lorraine asked about a lack of auditing, and I'm not sure what she meant, other than I'm assuming she means the long-term care process that I refer to, but maybe I'm wrong. What I think needs to be done in that instance is not just have regulations, but actually have statutory laws that can be enforced. Regulations, as we've seen, they just don't get complied with. There needs to be accountability for sure. And with respect to, Lorraine said that she was with the police. If I am mistaken, and her question related more to the police. So Greg Shaw and I sit on a Toronto Police Services board. It's a consultative committee, an advisor to the chief of police on elder law issues. And we work diligently with a bunch of different stakeholders from all walks of life to come up with ways to educate the police, and I suppose also the public, on issues of social isolation and elder abuse, and to make the police more aware of what their powers are in terms of investigating reports of abuse. Many times in my practice, I'll hear a family come to me and say, well, we reported this to the police, but they didn't do anything. They said that it was a civil matter, that we had to retain a lawyer, which is not the case. So again, more awareness in that group as to what can be done, what investigations can be done with the criminal code. So Lorraine, I hope I've answered some of your question, and if not, I apologize. And with respect to the visibility issue, I don't know. I mean, when this whole COVID started, I have an office which is at Yonge and St. Clair, which is Midtown in Toronto, a fairly busy area. And for the first, I'm going to say 4 weeks, I would walk up to the office every day because I was there by myself and I could walk up, and I would see no one. And then gradually I was seeing lots of people on the streets, and every day when I walked to the office, I would see older people because there's, you know, a medical facility nearby, etc. And I started to see the return of the elderly people, masked, walking around. So I didn't see the visibility as zero, but I know for sure that there's going to be an unknown number where there has been abuse, in the same way that there are reports right now of increased domestic violence. And the effects of it, I'm sure, are far-reaching, and we're only seeing or hearing about the tips of the iceberg, so to speak. I don't know what the way forward is. It's a burden. It is.
2 more questions, Kim. And do you know, the thing that I love about listening to you is that when you don't know the answer, you actually say, you know, and what are we going to do? So you don't have this box of solutions. You have those actions that relate to your profession. So thank you for that. We've got 2 more questions, one from Ralph and one from Vijay. So Ralph, are you available to come forward? Okay, could I ask Cynthia then? So Vijay and then Cynthia Stuen. Vijay?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's Vijay from Mauritius, far away Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Yes, you know, we have the tendency to have an image of the youth, which is fantastic, beautiful, you know, a lot of glamour, as opposed to older persons who lose their personality, their confidence, and they feel inadequate. This is my observation and a question from you, Kimberly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Cynthia?
Yes, you really triggered some interesting thoughts on my part for how we move forward. But I wondered if you have or you know of any data on abuse across the lifespan. So do we know that people who abuse their children might also abuse their older parent? Because that really is, you catch it at that, it would have implications for prevention. But I don't know if that data exists to show us a lifespan approach.
Okay, so
Okay.
Kim.
Is there one more, or is that it?
No, go with that.
Well, Vijay, wow, Mauritius is so far away. You're right. The media portray the image of youth as beautiful and glamorous, and it's quite the opposite as one ages. I think we're doing better, at least in Canada. I see some change in media imaging of older adults, really taken on, I'm going to say, by different groups. You see it in advertising more so now. But you're right. I think as we age, we all psychologically feel the effects of not being young anymore and wanting to be young, and feel that we're, you know, not as, I'm going to say, not as great as we once were about contributing to society, when in fact the experience that we've had in a lifetime makes us better placed to contribute. It's a problem. We can do better, for sure. I don't think the respect that we owe to older adults is necessarily carried carried out in our media. Our media is irresponsible in that regard. So yeah, we can do better. I don't have any data, Cynthia, on abuse across the lifespan. It's an interesting question, and I wonder, a colleague of ours who may have attended one of your town hall meetings already, Laura Tamblin Watts, who works now with CanAge. She is also a teacher at the University of Toronto, and she teaches a sociology course on gerontology, and she may have some of that data. And so if you get in touch with myself or Jane, we can provide you with Laura Tamblin Watt's contact details, and she may be able to point you to some study or data on that.
Okay, thank you. And the last question from Francis Zanadin. So Francis? Are you there, Francis?
Oh,
okay.
Sorry, can't unmute. Thank you very much, Kimberly. I was wondering, you had said that there was a need for legislation and not just regulations. And I guess in the legal world, that's a huge difference. In that context, do you think that an international convention to protect the rights of older persons would be helpful at the national level as well?
Well, I'm always in favor of international conventions. During my degree in England, I lived in England for 10 years, and I did a master's degree in international human rights law, and fascinated by it, have a lot of belief in it. I suppose if there was sign on or sign up by countries, and it was actually implemented and carried through, yes, of course, I think it would be helpful. But therein lie the problem, because we don't have everybody that signs up to these international conventions or supports them. And then there is the problem of enforcement and implementation.
So Kim, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you to give our town hall participants some takeaway messages, but I just want to stop for a moment. Greg and I have lived in Canada now for some 18 years, I think. And when I first came to Toronto, you know, a person came up to me in a meeting, and she is very diminutive. She's one of the strongest, most courageous, most feisty individuals that I've ever had the experience to meet. And her name is Dr. Elizabeth Podnicks. Now, Elizabeth, from the get-go, you know, was and is a driving force and in the prevention of elder abuse, not only in Canada and worldwide. So I did want to acknowledge Elizabeth's presence at this meeting. I'm not sure whether she's on or not, but she continues to be a force in Canada, in Ontario. So thanks, Mark and Jane, for helping me to recall that. So Kim, over to you for your closing thoughts.
So I have the good fortune of sitting on the Toronto Police Services Board with Dr. Podnicks, and I echo your comments. She is larger than life when it comes to advocacy for the elderly. I guess my takeaways are we need to be loud and vocal and deliberate in our advocacy. We need to adapt and learn and develop new protocols to service our clients, our friends, our neighbors. We need to be able to overcome the obstacles that this pandemic has presented. And I think we need legislation to help support us in doing so. And importantly, from my perspective, we need to have access to our clients. We need to be able to overcome issues concerning being properly retained. We need the means to meet our clients on video, audio, and not restricted, regardless of circumstance, and we need to be able to enforce this. I'm just going to give an example of what I mean by that. Under our substitute decision-making regime, Section 3 of our legislation permits Section 3 counsel to be appointed for the subject matter of a proceeding for the person whose capacity is at issue. And there's no real guidance given in the legislation about what that Section 3 counsel can do, but that Section 3 counsel is deemed to have competent instructions, and that's regardless of incapacity. But almost every time we're appointed as Section 3 counsel, we have to go to court to get an order. Why? Because of abuse. We need an order that we have access to our clients, that we can use our clients' money to pay our bills, to have uninterrupted visits and meetings with our clients, to meet our clients alone. So we need these orders in the usual course because of abuse. And so that need is even more enhanced in a situation of COVID, and not with respect to Section 3 counsel. But we need to be able to have protections that permit us to visit our clients, to make sure that they are not denied the opportunity to make a valid will or a power of attorney document, or to consult a lawyer on a particular problem, maybe of abuse, to make sure that the isolation doesn't prevent them from getting the help that they need, that they can contact a lawyer and understand that they can have their problem addressed. And so in closing, that is one of the takeaways I'm looking for. I'm looking for support in the ability to discharge my professional obligations properly. We also need other things, like we need a Predatory Marriages Act that permits proper standing for challengers, and that takes our common law out of the 1700s when married individuals, especially women, didn't have any property rights. There's so many issues affecting seniors, and it is time to legislate it. Look at the public inquiry report and the Law Commission reports. Why haven't any of these comprehensive reports with the benefit of many stakeholders, why haven't any of the recommendations been implemented? We have a lot to do. I wish I had all the answers, Jane, but I don't, and I'll keep trying in that pursuit. And I thank you for involving me today.
Yeah, look, thanks, Kim. You know, just in closing, you know, I wanted to thank you, not for who you are, but the way that you work. You know, the thing that I know about you, Kim, is that you respect civil society as partners, true partners in, you know, this work. And I think it's that building bridges across different sectors and disciplines that is one of your greatest strengths, both personally and also your firm. So not only are you smart, intelligent, and funny, you know, you bring this strength of partnerships to the fore and never diminish the value of patient organisations, civil society. So thank you very much for that. In closing, thank you to the IFA staff, Andra Stanku and Chesley in particular, but also the UN reps that are on the call today. IFA's got UN reps in Geneva, you know, in Austria and in New York, and many of them are on the call today, including Cynthia and Francis and James and Jackie and Valerie, but also Dr. Vinod Shah, the Regional Vice President of Asia Pacific in India. So thank you all. Thank you for continuing to participate in these town halls. We are going to continue them for another short while, and next week we have the great pleasure of being in conversation with Ruth Marks. Ruth is the Regional Vice President of IFA in Europe, but also Chief Executive of Wales Council for Voluntary Action. So we welcome her next week. And once again, thank you for your participation. We will gather up the chat box and the links and send them out to you. There's been lots of conversation amongst delegates today. So thank you, and may you be safe and well and be with us next week. So thank you very much.